In terms of the jail, when did the Willow Street property first come to your attention?
Probably 3-4 years ago. It was kind of brought up, and the problem was the property owner, it was in wetlands at the time. They didn't have a clear title, didn't know exactly how to go about it. So it was always, wow, if that could ever come to tuition, that would be a great location for the facts that it's right next to the current sheriff's facility and all of his current programs and everything else. It would just make a lot more sense that everything be unified and all under one. And then therefore we as the parish, the transportation to the courthouse would be a lot easier. The inmates wouldn't have to walk across the street, stuff like that. The other part was looking at other parishes and kind of seeing how they've done things. The other thing was the schools, and I'm concerned about that too. My kids go to J. Wallace James, and there's a church next door. What I found was that there was a lot more churches and a lot more schools 1 block from the current jail. They have residents downtown. So comparing it and looking at apples to apples, it was not a north side versus south side. It wasn't because let's just put it in a bad section of town that had no factors whatsoever in looking at this property. It was based on the facts that it just made sense all the way around.
The people who were here tonight who voiced their opposition, the people who wrote in, they don't seem to buy that. They think it's okay, it's convenient to put it here because it's on the north side. This is going to bring another element they don't necessarily want. What do you say to them?
I say look at your current facility. The sheriff's facility has been there for years right now. I haven't heard of one person that is in a program that has escaped that facility and has caused any harm to the church or the neighborhood way in the back or the J. Wallace James. You heard it tonight. 35 years, the warden said maybe 4 or 5 people might have got out. They got them back right away. No schools were harmed, no churches were harmed, and there's 3 to 4 or 5 times more schools and churches downtown than there is where the future site is. It's a tough decision. Look, no matter what, nobody wants a jail near them. So no matter if you want to put it in an unincorporated area, those people would complain. And then if you put it in another part of Lafayette, they would complain. So no matter what property site you're going to look at, you're always going to draw people that are going to oppose it. That location just makes sense because your sheriff is already there. His facility's there. He has patrol there. He has programs there. It makes sense to have it next door, and get this thing from a 5-story to a 1-story. State-of-the-art COVID, it just makes more sense to do it that way. But I can assure you that it's not to pick on that side of town. It's not to say that's where it belongs because that's what it's facts oriented. And I would say to those people, go look on a map and see how many churches and schools that are 1 block from the current jail, and do their homework on what we had to do to make that decision.
Outside and talking to people, they had walked out before you'd made your remark about even if this gets, with the ordinance passing, it may not happen tomorrow, it may not happen in 10 years. When I mentioned that to them, they didn't buy it. So can you elaborate on what you meant in the meeting and why this project may or may not ever happen?
Sure. This is just the first step of acquiring a location. The next process has to be, one, you have to design it. You have to see what it looks like. You got to get a cost estimate. You got to find out what it's going to cost you to create a new 1-story jail with state-of-the-art technology, with conditions where you can take in COVID-19 patients. All of our stuff is outdated. That government moves slow. Just like it takes long to pave a road or identify a project. One, we don't have any funding to even talk about building a new facility. The first step was finding a location. Now, administration, parish council, the sheriff, clerk of courts, there's a big conversation that all has to come together to see what that looks like. What does it cost? Do you have to go to the public for additional funding? Is there risk? There's so many things. It's not clear cut and dry, and it hasn't been determined what that cost is. Not only that, cost of lumber and material today has already increased 30-40% compared to pre-COVID. So maybe if we were talking today about a jail that costs X amount, maybe that's now doubled or tripled that. It'll never come to tuition until it ever comes back down. So I said that because it's the truth. It's not something that we have a design right now. We don't know what it looks like. We don't know what the cost is. We haven't even sat down with the sheriff to say, hey, what is your vision of what it looks like? The first conversation was, well, before we can even go down that road, we have to find land. So that's where it's at.
One of the gentlemen, the former corrections officer spoke, said that putting this there may make it more difficult to sell the tax to residents on that end of town. Based on what you're saying, that's all awfully preliminary right now, or just speculation, because really and truly there isn't a method to go looking for the tax money right now.
That is correct. That is correct. And not only that, it's a parish-wide decision. Scott, Dussault, Carencro, Youngsville, it's not just that side of town that votes on that. That's something that has to be considered. Even if we cross that bridge, it has to be considered amongst all municipalities in the city of Lafayette and the unincorporated to say, hey, one, are you willing to build a new jail, or are you not willing? I mean, it's a parish-wide decision. It's not just one side, So it's a big conversation for something down the road.
So what's next?
What's next is having those discussions to say, hey, do y'all want to proceed with looking at what it costs? Or do we want to just wait? Or is it going to be a next budget decision? Or are we going to throw another $3.5–4 million into a jail that's falling apart? We probably need to check with the public and say, hey, if there's rescue money coming down from the federal government and it can be used for infrastructure, COVID-19, changing how we take inmates with COVID-19, are we going to get federal money? I don't know that. I mean, that's where it has to go. If you cannot get any federal money or any match, then you got to ask the taxpayers of Lafayette Parish, will you support funding a jail through either a sales tax? I don't know potentially what it can determine, but there is no sticker price and there is no design and there's no blueprint. I swear to you, none of that has been even presented or even been created, because you have to hire a firm. You have to, there's just so much hoops and so many things you have to go through. It's not like we bought the land and tomorrow we have a plan. We don't have that. That's going to take at least years, I think years, because in order for it to pass, you got to get everybody on board, which means you got to talk to all the municipalities. You got to talk to the public. You got to find out what's what. It's not an easy sale, because of what people think is drainage and roads and bridges. That's priority. It is, however, a government, we still have to have a functional jail, and we have to have programs for these people that are struggling, and you still have to provide that type of you have to provide that for the inmates, and it's costing the Lafayette Parish tons of taxpayer dollars to keep throwing into something that is outdated, not security updated. It's not COVID-19. It's just not designed to handle today's mandates and today's situations that we have with COVID-19 or any future pandemic down the road. It's just it's not there, So we have to try to look at that. And I know the public's going to say, hey, I never been arrested. I never got a ticket. I never committed a crime. I don't care about a jail. I'm not supporting a tax for new jail because I don't go to the jail. That's the mentality, and I'm not saying that's wrong. That is correct. For most people, going to say, I don't want to throw more money at a jail. I'd rather spend more money on drainage. I'd rather fix my road. I'd rather fix this and that. But the reality is, this parish council is on the hook and responsible for managing the taxpayers' dollars in regards to the jail.
Any final thoughts?
No, just one step at a time. Nothing's guaranteed. If there's something else that comes available, or they find out that the property is not appropriate and maybe it's too much of a wetland, or it don't structurally fit like we thought, no harm, no foul. Move on to something else. So it's still a long way down the road.